That time, yes, and I wouldn't have been able to carry one anyway for the simple fact that I wasn't in the front line duties and so on. But I was given CS spray back in the early stages of my policing career, and even then I wasn't particularly wanting to carry them because I think it's a huge responsibility to be able to carry something that can in fact be quite lethal.
It's a huge responsibility stepping out onto the streets of Northamptonshire or in your case London, coming up against people who are armed, not just with knives necessarily, but firearms too, and having nothing better on you than a good old-fashioned truncheon, for heaven's sake. Those days are gone.
No, absolutely right, because people do carry weapons, knives, firearms have increased in recent months. So I absolutely support what Nick Oldley is saying. However, what I would say is this, it's not a question of arming every single one of your officers. I think they need to be given the option, because there are many police officers that go into policing, not necessarily because they have the ability to carry a taser, but because they have other really good quality skills. Now, in order to use a taser and to be effective, the first thing you need to think about is conflict management. And that means having the art of communication and be able to de-escalate a situation before you actually get to use that taser.
It sounds like what you're heading towards, Shabnam, is saying that sometimes a taser can be used by officers who don't want to go through the long, drawn-out process of dealing with things and dealing with a problem and a problem individual in a better way.
Well, look, our police officers are put into very difficult situations. They've got to make very quick, on-the-spur decisions. Police officers are getting younger. They don't necessarily have the ability to think immediately that, actually, I don't need to use this taser. I could have a conversation, first of all. They're not there to be used so that you can just, use them for compliance, for example. They are there for protection of the public, for protection of the police, and protection of the individual who is potentially going to be subjected to that taser.
I always think it's useful to remind people, and I'm sure you always remind people, that our police officers are not some sort of separate breed. They are drawn from the ranks of society, aren't they? And as such, they will have the same, to some degree, same proportion of characteristics that we have in society at large. So there will be, presumably, some police officers who will be a little bit gung-ho. Could you look, when you look back at your policing career, particularly when you're on the front line, could you see officers you wouldn't be entirely comfortable
100%. 100%, and without being disrespectful, there's some that I wouldn't necessarily trust with a pen, let alone with a taser. But it's important to note that it's not that they haven't got the ability to police at the streets. It's just that they may not have the ability or the mind sense or the presence of mind to be able to decide when that taser is actually got to be discharged. You've got to remember, the use of taser can be fatal. We've got recent incidents in the last few months, which we can't really talk about because they're subject to investigation. We had a 93-year-old in a care home who was tasered, who 3 weeks later died. We had a gentleman that entered the river at Chelsea Bridge, having been tasered. Unfortunately, he also died, and there's been other incidents. So it's a huge amount of risk. The first risk for police officers is public safety, the safety of the individual, the safety of the perpetrator, and the safety of the police officer. So I understand why officers should carry them.
You didn't put the safety of the perp above the safety of the police officer there, did you? That was just how you...
Everybody's safety counts. When you go in as a police officer, you're not sitting there thinking, I've got to save myself or the perpetrator. You're thinking, I have got to save and I've got to be able to protect the public from their own selves, but also to protect other members of the public.